Contracts. Introduction. The role of contracts in Scientology. Scientology safeguards its interests and limits legal exposure through a series of contracts, waivers, and release forms, which members must sign throughout their journey. These contracts, collectively referred to as contracts, effectively force members to sign away critical legal rights, such as access to proper care or the ability to pursue legal action in traditional courts. One key aspect of these contracts is the recognition of Scientology as a church/religion. By signing the contract, granting it First Amendment protections that serve as roadblocks for members seeking legal recourse in the event of harm. Many individuals who have signed these contracts, either knowingly or under pressure, later found themselves struggling to hold Scientology accountable. The consequences of signing these documents are far-reaching, often resulting in significant repercussions that make it difficult to pursue justice. Why does a religion require so many contracts? A critical question arises. Are there other churches requiring constant legal waivers as part of membership? Scientology is one such organization, where members are repeatedly required to sign contracts. One journalist and private investigator remarked, "What other religion requires you to sign a 6-page contract?" An excerpt from Razor magazine paints a chilling picture. Imagine a church so dangerous, you must sign a release form before you can receive its spiritual assistance. This assistance might involve holding you against your will for an indefinite period, isolating you from friends and family, and denying you access to appropriate medical care. You will, of course, be billed for this treatment, assuming you survive it. If not, the release form absolves your caretakers of all responsibility for your suffering and death. Welcome to the Church of Scientology. Mike Rinder, a former high-ranking member of Scientology, provides further insights. Working with lawyer Bill Drescher, we drafted and implemented one-sided agreements that everyone who partakes in Scientology services is required to sign, forfeiting the right to sue, and any rights to access the records of Scientology services, and even giving Scientology authorization to hold a signee against their will should they have a psychotic episode, so they can participate in the introspection rundown. These contracts don't merely safeguard the church but place members in a precarious position, further highlighting the concerning legal mechanisms employed by Scientology to maintain control. Overview of some contracts and key findings. Contract 1. Attestation of religious belief regarding the Scientology religious film called Orientation. The first contract members sign acknowledges Scientology as a religion, a move that shields the organization from legal challenges under the U.S. Constitution's First Amendment religious protections. By agreeing to this, members give Scientology wide-ranging religious exemptions, including protections that make it harder to hold the church accountable in legal disputes. After watching the introductory Scientology movie Orientation, you sign this religious belief contract affirming that you view Scientology as a religion. This contract then becomes a foundational legal roadblock, making it more difficult to pursue legal recourse against the organization later on. Contract 2. Religious Services Enrollment Application, Agreement, and General Release. This general release contract new Scientologists must sign imposes significant legal waivers that heavily restrict their rights when dealing with Scientology. Some key points include: members waive the right to sue Scientology or any affiliated organizations and forfeit the right to be represented by a lawyer in disputes. The contract presents L. Ron Hubbard's teachings as observations, not truth claims, raising concerns about the validity of Scientology doctrines. Religious services are broadly defined to include Scientology-specific auditing, ethics, and justice processes, which former members argue are used for control rather than spiritual growth. Each Scientology church is a separate legal entity, complicating legal action. Notably, the contract states I understand that, by itself, the amateur does nothing. Members must declare satisfaction with all prior services. Specifically it states, by agreeing to proceed with further services, I acknowledge complete satisfaction with all services I have participated in previously. Members relinquish the right to seek refunds for any donations made. Members must agree not to use third parties, including lawyers, to reclaim funds. The contract also opposes psychiatric care, with members agreeing to avoid psychiatric treatment, and authorizing the church to intervene if necessary. It further specifies that if government or family members attempt to compel psychiatric treatment, the church will intervene on behalf of the member to prevent it. Members waive their right to legal action permanently/forever against Scientology or any affiliated organizations. Members are required to distance themselves from anyone antagonistic to Scientology, further isolating them from outside support. A clause states that even if parts of the contract are unenforceable, the rest remains valid. Former Scientology executive Mike Rinder has explained in a legal affidavit that these contracts are crafted to shield Scientology from litigation, noting that objections to the contract are treated as attacks on the church, often leading to harsh consequences. In summary, this contract severely limits members' legal rights, isolates them from external support, and tightens the church's control over their legal, financial, and personal affairs. Contract 3. Agreement regarding confidential religious files. In the religious files contract, Scientologists sign away their rights to ever access, inspect, or review the personal information Scientology keeps on them, which is compiled during various types of auditing sessions. These files contain highly confidential details shared by members throughout their progression on the bridge to total freedom. Despite paying substantial amounts, often hundreds of thousands of dollars, members are permanently barred from viewing their own personal records. However, it has been well documented that Scientology does not adhere to this level of confidentiality when it serves its own interests. If a former member speaks out against the organization, Scientology often searches through these personal records to find incriminating or embarrassing information, which is then weaponized for intimidation or to discredit critics publicly. This practice includes using the information to create defamatory websites targeting those who challenge the church. This imbalance of power shows the control Scientology holds over its members, using confidential information as a tool for coercion, while denying the individual any access to their own records. The religious files contract not only blocks members from their personal information, but also gives Scientology the power to exploit it against them, highlighting the invasive influence the organization exerts over its members. Contract 4. Agreement and general assistance regarding spiritual assistance. Known as the kidnap contract, this grants the church extraordinary powers to detain members indefinitely during mental health crises, without legal or medical oversight. If a member is deemed by Scientology to have gone type 3, a state of psychiatric distress, a Scientology case supervisor can order their forced confinement, as occurred in the infamous Lisa McPherson case, where McPherson died while undergoing Scientology's introspection rundown procedure. The contract requires members to waive their right to psychiatric treatment and accept Scientology's religious interventions instead. In the event of a psychiatric episode, members must refuse all external psychiatric care, allowing the church to manage the situation. Additionally, it authorizes Scientology to extricate members from psychiatrists, if necessary, giving the church the right to physically intervene and remove them from any psychiatric facility. Crucially, members who sign this contract relinquish the right to sue Scientology or its staff for any harm, injury, or death resulting from their treatment or confinement during such crises. This waiver absolves the church of all legal responsibility, effectively leaving the member with no legal recourse. Members are also required to sign this contract to continue receiving spiritual services, such as auditing, further solidifying the church's control over both their care and legal rights. The contract serves as a stark illustration of the extreme control Scientology exerts over its members, mandating total submission under the guise of religious protection, while severely limiting any external interventions or legal accountability. Contract 5. Secret OT Contract. As members progress up the bridge to total freedom, they are required to sign a secret OT contract agreeing to pay $100,000 for each breach of confidentiality regarding the secret OT levels. This contract enforces strict secrecy around highly sensitive Scientology doctrines, including controversial teachings like Xenu, the alien overlord, and body thetans, spiritual entities that supposedly inhabit individuals and the surrounding environment, even beyond Earth. This agreement reflects the extreme lengths Scientology goes to in order to safeguard its control and keep its inner workings hidden. By pressuring members into silence with severe financial penalties, the Church effectively prevents public scrutiny, ensuring that its most controversial and secretive doctrines remain concealed from the outside world. Contract 6. Non-disclosure covenant. Annual contract obligates members to refrain from criticizing Scientology or its leadership, imposing a $25,000 fine for each violation. Notably, this contract never expires, even if members leave the organization, further underscoring the church's control over current and former members alike. According to a veteran investigative journalist, the contract exemplifies how paranoid Scientology has become about potential whistleblowers. Evolving nature of the contracts. Scientology continuously refines its contracts in response to lawsuits, adding new legal clauses to close loopholes and protect the organization. Each revision makes it increasingly difficult for members to take legal action, further insulating Scientology from accountability. Additional shocking revelations with the contracts. Arbitration clause in contracts for Scientology services. When signing contracts to receive any Scientology service, members are bound by an arbitration clause that mandates disputes be resolved through the church's internal arbitration process rather than a legal court system. This clause becomes highly problematic for former members attempting to sue the organization. Under Scientology doctrine, anyone who sues the church is labeled a suppressive person, making them fair game for harassment without consequence. Since only Scientologists in good standing, per Scientology, are eligible to serve as arbitrators, there is an inherent bias, ensuring the arbitration process is one-sided and unfair to those labeled as suppressive. Complicating matters further, legal restrictions prevent courts from interpreting Scientology's internal policies. The Church refers to its rules as religious scripture to invoke First Amendment religious protections, shielding them from legal scrutiny. This means judges are often unable to assess whether the arbitration process is fair or biased, even when significant concerns arise. In a 2024 case, a judge, bound by legal precedent, was compelled to refer a dispute involving Scientology to arbitration led by Scientology, despite expressing concerns about the unfairness of the process. This ruling underscored the legal protections afforded to Scientology, leaving judges with little choice but to defer to the Church's arbitration process. As a result, victims of abuse within Scientology are forced to navigate an arbitration process managed by the very institution or individuals responsible for their claims of mistreatment. With internal arbitration governed by religious scripture, Scientology policies, which prevent the presence of lawyers or the ability to record the proceedings, except by pen and paper, victims are left to argue their cases in a hostile environment. These restrictive contracts effectively bar them from seeking justice in a court of law. General Release Contract, LRH Content Disclaimer. One of the more striking clauses in the General Release Contract concerns the writings and recorded speeches of L. Ron Hubbard. The contract explicitly states, "The writings and recorded spoken words of LRH on the subjects of Scientology and Dianetics are not a statement of claims by the Church, by any other Scientology church or organization, or by LRH." This means that by signing the contract, members are agreeing that all of Hubbard's works are to be understood as fiction, speculation, or imagination rather than factual claims. Furthermore, Scientology includes language asserting that no one, including the Church itself, is promising any specific results or benefits from Scientology services. This effectively revokes any previous promises or claims of spiritual improvement. Ironically, while the organization makes bold claims about the benefits of Scientology during recruitment and service promotions, this contract legally distances the Church from any such promises. It amounts to an admission that everything from Hubbard's teachings to the organization's promises could be considered fictional, even though these same claims are used to persuade individuals to join and spend money. Takeaway, considerations and logical conclusion. Signing these contracts significantly limits legal rights and protections, as members are often unaware of the full consequences. These contracts bind individuals to internal Scientology-led arbitration, preventing them from suing the Church and stripping away civil rights. Scientology's contracts serve to protect the Church's interests, effectively constraining members' legal freedoms, despite promoting the idea of freedom. It's crucial to fully understand the implications of these agreements and seek legal counsel before signing, as doing so can severely limit legal recourse in the future. The high risks of signing away legal rights through these contracts are evident in the well-documented experiences of former members. Contracts filled with arbitration clauses and disclaimers raise serious questions about why Scientology relies so heavily on legal protections that require members to constantly waive their rights. Such agreements, which classify payments as non-refundable donations and mandate internal arbitration, favor the Church while isolating members from unbiased legal systems. Courts often uphold these contracts due to First Amendment religious protections, further preventing members from seeking justice. Ultimately, these contracts safeguard the Church while eroding the legal rights of its members. For an organization that claims to promote freedom, its first act is to strip members of their civil rights and confine them to an internal arbitration system that offers little recourse. Given the risks, it is advisable to thoroughly understand the terms and seek legal advice before agreeing to such binding contracts.